welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. And last, but certainly not least, if you're interested in extra content on querying and publishing that's only for our members, please consider joining the Literary Prospects Patreon at patreon.com/literary prospects. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Holly Brickley studied English at UC Berkeley and received an MFA in fiction from Columbia University. Originally from Hope, British Columbia, she now lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband and their 2 daughters. Deep Cuts is her first novel. Holly Brickley, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your much celebrated debut novel, Deep Cuts. Publishers Weekly says Brickley debuts with a refreshing story of love and ambition in the early 2000s indie music scene. It's a banger. Bookseller says this rich, immersive, and transportive storytelling. The characters use music to understand themselves and each other, and the result is breathtaking. Author Claire Dederer says Holly Brickley's Deep Cuts is a joy. Busy, moving, and endlessly smart. Author Florence Knapp says clever, nostalgic, and deeply geeky. Deep Cuts is a literary indie pop classic, brilliantly constructed with a raw, heartfelt energy that captures an era. And one more, author Peter Ames says Deep Cuts tells us as much about the hearts of its music-loving characters as it does about music's power to distill overwhelming feelings into indelible art. Brickley is the real thing, and so is Deep Cuts. So with that, what can you tell us about this incredible debut, Deep Cuts?
Well, first of all, that was really fun. Thank you. I have to admit, I kind of have them all memorized. I probably could have done that for you. I've read them so many times, like, really? Really?
Let me look at that again.
Am I though? Am I the real thing? Okay. So what I can add to that is, so Deep Cuts is about a young woman named Percy who has lots of opinions about music, but no real talent for it. And she meets a musician named Joe in college. We start in the year 2000. And they begin a years-long friendship and collaboration and romance. And along the way, Percy uses music and song lyrics, including the songs she's creating with Joe, as well as popular songs that people will recognize, to kind of make sense of her life and understand her emotions and even kind of steer her decision making. And because of that, because it's first person narration, there's some elements of music journalism kind of woven throughout the fiction. And it kind of becomes the other love story of the book. There's the love story between her and Joe, and then there's the love that she has and that I think a lot of us have with music.
What was the spark that got this story started for you?
So I would say the spark was this desire to explore certain things that I don't understand or like about myself. Like I started with the pieces of myself that I hate the most, which are my lifelong envy of musicians, which the older I got, the more I was starting to realize was very silly.
Mm.
And my sort of critical perfectionist nature.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons I write. I mean, I think this is different for lots of writers, but for me, it's just kind of explore myself and understand myself better.
Mhm.
So I was starting with those, and then Percy quickly became her own person, and a lot of that stuff was sort of exaggerated. But that I think was the starting point. And I've always wanted to write a rock novel. I read High Fidelity like 15 times in high school when
Mhm.
it came out, and it was always just something I wanted to do, but I'd never figured out how to do it. Once I was starting with this thing that was important, this nut that was important for me to try to crack,
Mhm.
it just suddenly felt like this like snowball rolling out almost out of my control. Like I was just like chasing after it, delighted with this project. It was great fun to write.
You said your desire to explore your own envy of musicians. Can you talk about that a little bit? What you mean by
Yeah,
that?
so I'm from a musical family. My dad's a songwriter, and my uncle Tim is a songwriter and singer. My brother was in a band in high school called White Lightning, and he played the hot pink bass guitar. Um, I just wasn't ever good at it in any way. It just didn't come naturally to me. And other things did, like writing, but I always wanted that talent instead. And so I think those are that I was exploring, first of all, why did I want that talent? And also, why was I so sure at such a young age that I wasn't good at it, or that the entire
Mhm.
world, I had to be locked out of the entire world of it.
Mhm.
Um, and the older I got, the more I realized there were elements of misogyny, both internal and external, at play there. Just the bar that I think girls hold themselves to, especially back then, I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, was so much higher than it was for the boys.
Mhm.
There was just this, my brother and a lot of other, boys I know have this sort of like, it was like, yeah, I'll just try this. And I didn't have that because I had to be good at things in order to try
Mhm.
them. And I know there's lots of men who feel that way too. But yeah, that's what I mean by envy. It was this sort of, I don't know, it's this kind of ridiculous desire to be someone else almost in a way. And I thought, well, what if I put that in a love story where it would be so complicating? You can't want to be the person you're in love with. Um, and so that's what I was exploring. And I have to say it was very therapeutic. Like I've never been one of those people who say writing is like therapy, but those people might be onto something because by the end I just had so much fun. And that's another thing that I envied about it was it was so much more fun than writing. I'm a social person. I'm an introvert, but I always say I'm an introvert who likes to party, which is a horrible combination. But I wanted to be like they just seem to have so much fun jamming and collaborating, and I was just like at my screen alone.
Mhm.
But I had a blast writing this book, and it connected with people the way that, not the same way that music seems to connect with people, but it scratched the itch that they seem to be scratching by making people happy and helping people understand themselves. And so now I think I'm good. I'm good with this talent I have, actually.
Well, you've said that you believe music has the power to shape your feelings and even your choices in life. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you mean by that exactly.
I guess because it helps you. For me, it made me feel at a very young age high, high on the sort of possibilities of life. Um, there's a scene in the book that repeats when she hears this song by the Beach Boys, Surf's Up. Whenever she hears it, she feels like there's just like doors opening onto doors. It's this endless feeling of an endless possibility. Um, and that music made me feel that way more than anything at a young age. And eventually, of course, books. I mean, books just as much, I guess. But music has a power to hit you in your life. Like it's the only
Mm.
art form that you are doing other things often while you're consuming it, you know?
Ah.
Like you're not really gonna be, I mean, maybe not with audiobooks, you might be out walking the dog or something, but you're not like dancing or having sex or while you're taking in an abstract canvas or reading a poem. I can't think of anything else that actually is reaching into your life in the moment of action the way that
Mm.
music does. And so I wanted to bring that to life where in the scenes where she's actually kind of in this heated moment with a person and the song is playing and it can shape your emotions kind of when it matters, you know?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. You listened, well, first off, it's interesting that you brought up, I was going to ask you, do you think that literature does the same thing? And I love that you've made this point about music actually. We're listening to music at all these like important pivotal moments in our life in a way, while we're interacting with other people in a way that we may not be doing when we're obviously reading or listening to a book, right? Or,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to shortchange fiction. I think
oh, well, no.
fiction is my first love, obviously. And it's one way that Percy and I are different because I don't think, reads a book the whole time, or at least not that isn't assigned to her. And so, yeah, and fiction is so much more about empathy. And there's so many other things I think you can learn from it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's more, I don't know, there's a little bit more removed. It's more reflective to me. It's
Yes.
less immediate and visceral.
Hmm. Hmm. You listened to a lot of music while working on this novel, while doing your writing, right? And at one point, a song that you were listening to actually inspired a plot point. Is that right?
That's true. Yeah. It wasn't usually like that. It was usually that most of the songs came the other way around.
Hmm.
I needed a song to go with a plot point, and I would, kind of hunt it down. Um, or I would know beforehand, I would, um, but yeah, there was one time I was in the shower, so I was just like, I was listening to a lot of music at this point, because I was hunting for inspiration, and so I would just like tell my Alexa to shuffle music and just be like, next, next. Um, and one time I was in the shower and shuffle was on, and this Fleetwood Mac song came on, What Makes You Think You're the One? And yeah, it sounded like my characters talking to each other. And I had this idea yeah, it inspired a plot point. I'm not sure how to say it without giving a
Yeah, no
spoiler.
spoilers.
But yeah, it was a really powerful experience. Of course, I had to like dripping wet run to my run to my laptop and get it down. That was happening a lot back then too. Yeah.
There is something about things coming to you while you're in the shower and running. Yeah, the dripping
Shower and
wet run
driving,
from the shower.
the most inconvenient times.
Yes. The story is told in first person from the perspective of Percy. And she's kind of looking back on this time in her life with more wisdom. We hear it. We get these little insights where she says things like, well, this wouldn't be okay now, but then we said X, Y, and Z, as she's telling us this story. What led to the decision to tell this story from this particular perspective, point of view?
I don't know. I started that way and I never thought twice about it, honestly. I knew I wanted to write about young people.
Mhm.
Um, I knew I wanted to write a first love story. I loved normal people. That was like
Mhm.
a moment for me where I was like, oh, I could just write a love story. I could just kind of do what I want. And so I knew I wanted to write about young people, but I didn't, I think just quickly it started happening that I was inserting my 40 something wisdom into it because that's where I am right now.
Mhm.
And I don't know. It was subconscious, I think. It wasn't a decision. It was just the way it came out.
Also, we get some of Percy's, as you mentioned, music journalism. We see sort of early on in the book her starting to try to write her first article for this zine, and we learn a lot about her through like first draft, second draft, third draft. Was that something that just came naturally as well, or sort of inserting the?
No.
Okay, how did that?
Not that. Other pieces of music journalism, but the one that you're talking about was actually a flashback story.
Mm.
Um, it's a sorry, a flashback chapter. It was two flashback chapters that were back to back, fairly early in the book. You know, that first third where you kind of have to like establish things about your character, and it's always a dance to kind of drip them in. And I had just used these two songs because music is like that, right? Yeah, there's certain
Mhm.
songs that are just like, oh, this is the song
Mhm.
about my relationship, this particular relationship or this particular formative moment in my life. So I thought, well, this is a way I could do flashbacks. So, and I thought when I wrote it, because it was fairly early in the book, I thought I would do that again. I thought there would be a little more sort of non-linearness to the narrative. The
Mhm.
book did not end up that way as I kept going. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a pantser. I did not have this like outline I was adhering to. Um, so I was flying by the seat of my pants, and when I got to the end of the book, I realized there was only these two flashback chapters. It was felt a little awkward. They were back to back. I this is my first book. I didn't have an agent. I was a total nobody. And I had to get an agent. And I was reading things and listening to podcasts about like how to get an agent. And I heard a couple times like agents hate flashback chapters. And I was like, oh no, I already kind of knew that like they weren't working. A couple people had told me they were fine. So I was letting it go. But anyway, I read that and I was like, I got to fix those. And so, yeah, then I thought, well, I knew that she was writing for this zine at the time, but I hadn't shown any of her writing for it. Actually, there was one piece I did, and so I thought, well, I could maybe make it part of her writing. And then there was too much to include in one piece, so I had this idea to just make it like abandoned pieces. So this is her first draft, this is her second draft. And it ended up working really well. I have a lot of people telling me they really love that. And it's such a funny thing because it's like, it was just because I was worried about agents. I liking flashback chapters, which is like I guarantee you the agent I ended up with wouldn't is fine with flashback chapters. Like just one of those dumb things they say.
I love that origin story for that because it's true. I was reading it and thinking, this is so smart. What a smart way to do this and like get this flashback in here. And it's interesting and feels like fresh and unusual. Speaking of getting an agent, what was your publication story? How did it
It
all
was
happen?
very, very slow and long, and then all of a sudden super fast, which I guess is how it goes, right? Yeah, I mean, not very slow, but I had once I finished it, I felt pretty confident. I had sent it to some friends who loved it, and I knew I was ready. I went to AWP, like attended a panel about getting an agent, like took notes, listened to all the podcasts, really worked super hard on my query and my first chapter.
Mhm.
Like like that perfectionist streak I mentioned earlier. Like,
Mm.
I think, I could have done with like 50 less revisions and still gotten the agent that I had ended up with, but whatever. I had a good package that I sent out, but then nothing happened. I think it took 6 months. It was mostly just crickets, nobody getting back to me, a couple full requests, but then they would decline it. And then one of the first agents I'd sent it to, or no, then I got a yes from one person and from one agent. And then once I could send out that email that says, I have an offer of representation, you have a week to let me know or whatever.
Mm.
Then all of a sudden there was more interest, and then I got to pick the agent I wanted. So and then everything happened extremely fast. Yeah, we sent it out, and I got to, there was an auction, and it was a dream. And I've been living in some sort of strange simulation ever since then.
Are you working on a new novel now? Or do you sort of, because I assume a lot of time has passed since you actually finished this one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm more than halfway through the next one.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
What is your process like? Then from when you're going from, you said you're a pantser, but when you first get that germ of an idea, what happens in between that and getting to like your finished draft?
Yeah, it's a lot of feeling my way. And I get very obsessive about it if it's going well. And I think now that I've been trying this for so long, and there's so many years of nothing really sticking for me,
Mm.
now I know that I have to be obsessed. I have to love it so much that this is my favorite thing to do. And then I know that I'm on the right path. Otherwise, why do it? Like, it's
Yeah.
just not. So, so as soon as I feel that way, I kind of just let that snowball roll, and I just have fun with it. It's very hard because I have children. And I mean, when I'm in this zone, I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to eat or sleep, or I could write like 20 hours a day and sleep 4 hours a day.
Wow.
Um, but I obviously can't do that. So it's the struggle becomes for me doing the other things.
Mm.
But as for what's happening on the page, it's like, yeah, I'm kind of like steamrolling ahead because I'm having so much fun with it. But I revise constantly too. I only let myself go so far before I go back and revise. So I'm not like a dirty draft type of person.
Mm.
I'm like, I just I can't feel good about it if it's not good, and then I'm not going to have fun. Plus, that's part of the pleasure of writing for me, is like getting that sentence feeling right and moving
Mm.
everything around so that the musicality of the line feels good to me. That's just part of what I love most. That
Mhm.
and like dialogue and character are what I love. I don't love the plot part. So I need a little bit more time to be feeling my way through characters and tone, and then to let the plot ideas kind of come out of that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's feeling my way through it.
Have you always been a writer?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%. My mom tells this story about before I could write, I had her write words on cue cards for me, and then I would put them in or sentences. Like, I was creating stories based on the words that she was giving me on these cue cards.
Wow.
Which I think now there's like games, like there's like fridge magnets for that, but back
I was
then
just
it was
picturing that, like the fridge
yeah,
magnets. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and then I mean, my parents say from a very young age that it was clear that's what I wanted to do, and I've always loved it, and I've always loved reading so much. Um, so yeah, it was just hard for me for many years to reconcile it with the rest of my life. Everybody talks about work and motherhood and all of the other things that are in competition with writing. And those are definitely part of it. But for me, it was also just fun. I really like having fun. I really like, going out to shows, and I like getting really obsessive about music and spending quality time with my girlfriends. And there was just always my 20s, I just didn't really write much. After grad
Mhm.
school, did an MFA program, and then
Mhm.
I had that job that Percy has in the third act of the book where it was a trendsetter research job where I was paid to go onto dance floors and find the coolest people and interview them.
I mean,
Um,
that's a cool job.
it was a cool job,
I wanted
but
to
no,
ask you about that.
yeah, not conducive to writing. Yeah. So anyway, writing was sort of in conflict with all those things. And then once writing became fun for me, once I figured out how to write what I really wanted to write and enjoy it, then all that conflict just evaporated.
Mhm. Well, because now they sort of go together, right? It sounds like you figured the way to meld the two together. I'm interested in this trend researcher job. How do you think, I know you said it took you away from your writing. Do you think that that former career informs your writing now in certain
Oh,
ways?
totally. Well, especially this book. I'm and it kind of comes back to what you're saying about writing from this perspective now, looking back on it. At the time, it took me away from my writing, but now I'm really grateful for that period of my life because it just gave me this really unique window on my generation because I was always observing what we were doing, what the trends were, the not just the micro trends, not just the skinny jeans, but also the sort of the obsession with individuality and the sort of like grimy F it all attitude of indie sleaze and what that meant and how it played into larger cultural contexts. I was actually thinking about that stuff at the time,
Mhm.
um, which is different. And it allowed me, I think, to write about that time in a way that I like to think it corrects a couple things that people say. The way that people look back on history is sometimes
Mhm.
different, than
Mhm.
the way it felt at the time. I remember my parents always saying that about the 60s, and now here I am. Oh my God, it makes me feel so old. Um, yeah, the way it felt at the time was different than the way they talk about it now. And it was fun for me to be able to bring that period to life. But also in a way that I felt was authentic, but also that had this really unique lens on it of having been an analyst of it at the
Wow.
time. Mhm.
Before that time, you mentioned that you got an MFA
Mhm.
from Columbia. What was your MFA experience like?
Um, it was great. I was very young. I went straight
Mhm.
there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, as Percy does, although I had Percy do nonfiction and I was doing fiction,
Mhm.
but I went straight there after undergrad. And I got there, I was like, oh, you're supposed to do this when you're 28 or 30. I didn't, I was felt younger than most people. But I didn't feel and at the time I felt very confident in my writing. I didn't think I was too young to be there as a writer. I was like,
Mhm.
but looking back, I think I was too young to be there as a writer because I hadn't found my voice yet. So I was spending all of this money and energy trying to become Sigrid Nunez or Ben Marcus or Christine Scott was one of my mentors there. Mark Sloka. I became this I was because I'm so interested in the musicality of the line and of the sort of highly literary aspects of writing. I got a little bit sidetracked, I think, from what I really wanted to do or what I was naturally good at. Um, and that's fine, it's fine.
Mhm.
Looking back now, I'm like, okay, well, like I got where I needed to get eventually, and when I
Mhm.
got here, I had, I think, more perspective and wisdom that ended up informing the work anyway. So, but I definitely, when I think back on it, I think, oh, I could have had so much more fun if I was writing what I really wanted to write. But I didn't know what I wanted to write yet, you know?
I was going to say, what was it that you wanted to write that you felt like you weren't writing at that point?
I, I didn't know. I truly didn't know. I thought I was writing what I wanted to write,
Yeah.
but writing was painful for me.
Mm.
It
Mhm.
was, you know, blood from a stone. And I don't think that, and that's definitely not how it feels anymore. So, and there was a sort of attitude there, like that was okay. It's people would say, I don't like to write. I like the feeling of having written. You know,
Mm.
there was an attitude of, for me, that was never going to work. I can see
Mm.
now.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
but you know, there was a lot that was great about it. I was in New York. I was young. I had 2 years to basically just read and write, which is one of the greatest things about an MFA program. I mean, I was also waitressing,
Mm.
but I was mostly devoting my life to fiction. And I did learn a lot. And I did learn a lot from those literary masters I mentioned too, that I
Mm.
think still shows up in my work, even though it's
Mm.
become more accessible and is inched, you know, down on the commercial to literary spectrum for sure. I still think that there's some influence there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Do you have a daily sort of writing routine now? Or I know you said when you get like passionate about an idea, it's like you're just wanting to write all the time. Um, is that
No.
how it always looks, or do you have like a certain like these are the times that I write or something that gets you in the zone?
I wish I did. I really wish I could be a more organized person in lots of aspects of my life, and this is one of them. But no, I don't. I mean, right now there's a lot of this podcasts and stuff like that, and I'm just like completely not writing at all. Book two is completely on hold because if I start writing it, I won't be able to stop. It's like I'm an alcoholic or something. I just can't have a drink until I know I can binge. And so I'm really looking forward to when things quiet down with deep cuts again. And my favorite thing to do, I've gotten into a routine now. So I guess I do have a writing routine. My favorite thing to do is to go to a hotel.
Hmm.
Yeah. So like every January I go because the hotels are cheap. I'll just like go to downtown Portland. I live in Portland. I just
Mhm.
like go across the river and find a hotel. Um, I do it for my birthday every year, in the summer, and then like at least once in the fall. I'll just go for like 3 nights and I just do nothing else. I mean, I'll like go out and like grab a sandwich. So that's it. I just write and write and write and sleep like 5 hours a night, and it's amazing.
That's incredible to me. I'm so envious that you're able to just like have all that much to say like at once and get it all out and
I'm
get it
envious
all
of
out.
people who work from like 9 to noon every day and then devote the afternoon for the reading that they have to do to blurb and answering emails. And then they like somehow don't check their email from 9 to noon. Like, I don't understand that at all. Uh, yeah.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before getting this first novel published?
The publishing part or the right, like before the publishing part?
Before the publishing part,
Okay. Um, I
but also the writing part.
Yeah. It would I didn't fully know. I think people told me, but I didn't fully know how much work would be involved in the
Mm.
between the sale and the publication.
Mm.
That would be sort of its own job. Um, I feel like there's a better answer though. I think the main thing is if I had known, this is so fluffy. I don't know if this is going to help people, but if I had known that by writing about what is really, really true and specific to me,
Mm.
it really scratches my own itch that I could connect to other people. And I don't, it's sort of a cliche. I don't know. You hear people say it about like Taylor Swift or something, that she's really good at, right, because she's so specific, it becomes universal.
Mhm.
But I didn't get it. It's one of those cliches you have to like experience to really understand. Oh, that's actually true. I
Mm.
felt while I was writing this that like 20 of my friends were going to love it, and that was going to have to be
Mhm.
enough because it felt so specific to like where I had lived, what my age, the music I love.
Mhm.
Um, it just felt like it was going to be niche, and that makes it hard, especially those 6 months when I was trying to get an agent. It was just
Mhm.
like, oh, this sucks. The fun part was over, and it just felt like I'm going to do all this work to get this agent, and nobody's really going to like this book. I really felt that way.
Wow.
And now I'm getting like so many, I mean, almost every day I get a message from some bookseller or an influencer who's gotten an advance copy, and they keep saying, it feels like you wrote this for me.
Mm.
And so I guess I wish that I had known that was possible. I wish I had believed that was possible earlier,
Mhm.
because I think I would have had more fun with it. Not the writing was fun no matter what, but the sort of the effort it
Mhm.
took to actually get the agent, get it out into the world. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
It's a great answer. Well, following on from that, do you have like a best piece of advice for aspiring authors?
Write the book that you would most want to read. Like right now, it's snowing here in Portland, which doesn't happen very often. We maybe get this once or twice a year. It's so magical. Snow day, everything's canceled. Like, what is the book you wish you had right now to read?
Mhm.
If you could, if you're writing that, it's so much fun.
We have a traditional last question on the podcast, which is kind of especially perfect here. When Deep Cuts is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
I feel like it's tricky for me because I mean, there's so many in the book. It's like which one of those would be the title track or something. I am going to say, um, In the Aeroplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel,
Mhm.
which is not one of the songs featured in the book. There's another song from that album featured in the book, but um, it is the one that feels has that is just a feeling of being young.
Mm.
But for now, we are young. Let us lay in the sun and count every beautiful thing we can see. There's a lot of just nostalgia in the book, a lot of that feeling of possibility that you get not just from youth, but from music and art and finding yourself and finding your own voice. And that song always makes me feel that way.
I love that. I'm going to go listen to it right now.
So,
Holly Brickley, thank you so much for coming on. I've loved getting the chance to talk with you today.
thank you so much, Kelley, for having me. It was really, really fun.
To hear more specific tips from Holly on how she crafted her query and got an agent, and a few more insider nuggets, head over to the Patreon. Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.